Hello, welcome to the Alex webinar series, The Future of Technical Services. This is part one of a two-part series titled, Is Technical Services Dead? An overview of the future of technical services. I am Allison Armstrong, a member of the Alex Continuing Education Committee, and I will be your host for today's webinar. We have two presenters today, Amy K. Weiss and Julie Moore. I'm also joined by my co-host, Mary Beth Weber, the head of Central Technical Services at Rutgers University. Before I introduce our presenter, there's a few things to keep in mind for today's presentation. All attendees are muted. If you have questions for the presenters, please type them into the question box on your screen and they will answer them at the end of the presentation. We do not have interactive chat capabilities. If you wish to use Twitter to comment on today's presentation, you may use the hashtag you see on the screen. We do not monitor the Twitter feed, so please use the question box to submit questions and comments. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email with links to the recording and presentation slides. Our first presenter today is Amy K. Weiss, the head of cataloging and description at Florida State University. Amy previously worked at UC Santa Barbara, Appalachian State University, and Ball State University. She is the past president of OLAC, and she received her MLS from the University of Maryland, College Park. There may be a slight delay as I turn it over to Amy.
Hello. Let's see. It says, I am Amy Weiss. I'm head of cataloging and description at Florida State University, and I'm here to discuss, is technical services dead? And I would say that it's hard to say. Here I am outside of what was the Technical Services building at Florida State University. In my library, technical services was broken up 4 years ago. Metadata and other technical services tasks are performed in several departments and divisions around the library. An advantage is that we now communicate with more people and more departments. A disadvantage is that the sense of teamwork we had as a division has been weakened. So some possible answers to the question, is technical services dead? There are several possible answers. One would be yes. As technical services librarians retire and replaced, shrinking departments reflect the declining amount of work done in-house. Catalogs are being superseded by search engines. The construction of the catalog has been the center of technical services for 150 years. Without this central task, the value of technical services is waning. More and more materials are cataloged and processed outside of libraries, and more libraries simply shelve the materials received from vendors shelf-ready without any checks. This, of course, is assuming a physical book. DDA, or demand-driven acquisitions plans, require little more than a load of electronic records to give a library access to more materials than ever before. A small number of workers, mostly, if not all paraprofessional, can handle these tasks. Viewed this way, technical services is dead. Another answer, maybe. Technical services are no deader than any other library service. Technical services is just changing. Libraries have been ingenious at offering more and better services and materials to their patrons even as their resources have been shrinking. It would be a mistake to think that any library service would not be subject to elimination or outsourcing if it would allow a library to better serve its patrons. So consider reference services. Reference services used to consist of a librarian with an MLS sitting at a desk. Now many reference desks are being eliminated or combined with circulation services. Many library workers, not just librarians, are allowed to answer reference questions. Reference librarians have new responsibilities, such as departmental outreach and instruction. Similarly, technical services tasks have changed. One answer, kinda. Technical services tasks will continue to be performed in new and different ways and not necessarily in a technical services department. And another, no. Is the catalog really dead? Admittedly, it has changed. Different search strategies, a wider representation of materials, but patrons still want to know what is available to them right now. As long as there is a discrete catalog, there will be technical services. The integrated library system is a relatively new arrival on the library scene and is in the process of being replaced with other types of systems. This does not mean the end of the catalog or any of its attendant functions. Let's consider some traditional technical services tasks. Procurement of materials, making entries in a catalog so that the materials can be located, using or creating authorized access points to keep uniformity in the catalog, maintaining serial subscriptions, removal of damaged or outmoded materials. And there are others. These tasks are all still important. Let's look at our current circumstances. Current circumstances, there's a need or at least the desire to shift personnel costs to vendors. Let the vendors pay or not pay, as the case may be, for health insurance and so forth. Patrons desire instant gratification, no waiting for materials. There is an increasing acceptance of electronic materials even within populations that have rejected them in the past. Humanities faculty who previously resisted ebooks have been lured in by the giant selection of materials offered by demand-driven acquisitions plans. And there is a need to shift personnel into working on hidden collections such as archives and rare books and in institutional repositories. Workers with technical services skilled are needed but for new tasks. No discussion of whether or not technical services is dead can be had without discussing outsourcing. Outsourcing needs no introduction. The first outsourcing project dates from 1901 when the Library of Congress began to sell cards. A commercial firm, W.H. Wilson, began to sell cards in 1938. These cards needed to be duplicated, needed extra access points, and needed to be stamped and filed. Still, they were more convenient than typing each catalog card by hand. With the advent of OCLC and online catalogs, card production has gradually ceased, but the need for catalog records has continued. The ability of catalogers to load records at the time of receipt of materials has steadily increased and is an accepted tool in cataloging as cards were in their day. Now records are outsourced, purchased along with books from a vendor. These records may be enhanced or otherwise customized for the library. A type of outsourcing we seldom think of as outsourcing is the outsourcing of collection development. Approval plans made their appearance in the mid-1960s, and between 1965 and 1975 they came into use in about 51% of ARL libraries, rising to a level of 93% in 1996. Once a profile is completed by the subject librarians, the books come automatically, and if the profile has been completed properly, the books are mostly the ones that would have been selected individually. Until recently, a certain number of more doubtful purchases would come as slips, either paper or electronic, but with the advent of DDA, this is a less necessary aspect of the collection process. If you can have the whole book on a trial basis, it is not important to try to puzzle out from a slip if the book is needed. Projects of this type really spell death for technical services. There are a lot of tasks associated with making outsourcing work. You have to select a vendor. Creating profiles. For cataloging, this means selecting the level of cataloging which will be deemed acceptable and the format the cataloging will be received in. For collection development, recreating the approval profile to adapt it to DDA, deciding what will come in hard copy regardless of whether or not it is available electronically, deciding whether or not to continue electronic slips or whether to just get the books in the DDA plan. Loading record sets, removing catalog records for books not purchased through DDA plans, permanent cataloging for books bought through the DDA plans, and quality control of cataloging records for print and electronic books. So even with outsourcing, there is a lot to do in technical services. What else happens in technical services departments today? For serials, payment and management are two important roles. Accounting for serials has become more complicated as the electronic era has evolved. There are fewer and fewer instances where one can say that one is paying a certain amount for a specific subscribed journal as packages move to a database model. It is possible that one has access to the same content from multiple locations or different terms for issues or different date runs as the case with aggregated databases. Without an understanding of how e-journals are subscribed to separately, included in packages, as print journals and as print plus online fit together, it is almost impossible to keep serial accounting straight. University procurement departments are not prepared to deal with serials. A well-trained serials acquisitions librarian with good analytical skills and sharp attention to detail is a necessity for maintaining precision in the library's budget. While it is easy to believe that all serials are now available online, there are still many which are not. For these materials, complete and accurate serial holdings are important so that lending and borrowing of these materials can take place. Trained serialists are needed for this work. Okay, cataloging. Cooperative cataloging is what makes outsourcing and vendor cataloging possible. Someone has to catalog the book first, whether it be an employee of a vendor or a cataloger in the university. We all rely on each other's willingness to share cataloging data. The question arises, what if financial pressures lead a large number of libraries to discontinue participation in the cooperative cataloging process? There are a few libraries that have done so. If there is a mass exodus from OCLC and acceptance of vendor product as sufficient for libraries' need, would the cost of cataloging itself begin to rise? Would cataloging become a luxury item? Would systems offering full-text searching of electronic materials be considered sufficient? Cataloging departments perform tasks beyond cataloging books. Statistics keeping, data conversion, metadata of various sorts, participation in national and international standards creation, and discarding of materials in a responsible manner are all important and may not be what your administration associates with cataloging. Any discussion of downsizing cataloging departments needs to include a discussion of these tasks. A majority of the audience for this talk at ALA indicated that they used MarcEdit or another product to clean up vendor records from so-called shelf-ready plans. If you are going to have to depend on vendors, they need to produce a dependable product. Vendors need to do better. While running vendor records through MarcEdit is still faster than individual title cataloging, we should not need to be cleaning up after vendors after we have paid them for cataloging services. Cataloging frontiers. Over a decade since the white paper on hidden collections was issued, OCLC has published a report on how to make archival collections more visible, showing that this is an ongoing problem. Achieving this goal will require collaboration between archivists and catalogers and an understanding of the different goals and processes of each side. Rare and unique books require special handling. To prevent damage and minimize handling, it is desirable to catalog these books in-house. It is common to have backlogs of these materials, just as with archives. Because they require specialized knowledge to catalog, they need expert personnel to work on them. Institutional repositories require metadata for digital objects. Excuse me. For something that should have died 100 years ago, cataloging gets around. There are a plethora of metadata standards for specialized materials, not all of which talk together. There's a risk of creating information silos as new formats are developed. Metadata creators need to consider the flexibility of their data structures while developing new formats. BibFrame is already in use in a few institutions. It is believed that it will be easier to use than the massive Mark 21. The expectation seems to be that there will be fill-in-the-blank forms for BibFrame records, but filled in with what? Knowledge of RDA will still be necessary. No. Well, although that libraries may be ready for BibFrame now, the ILS vendors are not. Cataloging in the future will be a dance between catalogers, archivists, rare book librarians, vendors of library materials and library systems, and other interested parties. Okay, monographic acquisitions. Demand-driven acquisitions plans would seem to eliminate many of the duties of the monograph acquisitions librarians, but as with cataloging, this is only the case if one orders solely recent imprint Western European language materials. Acquiring materials from countries with less developed publication infrastructures, or acquiring self-published materials, or procurement of special collections materials will require an experienced monographic acquisitions librarian. As in serials, the bookkeeping required for library materials is not straightforward and cannot be turned over to personnel used for accounting for office supplies or payrolls. As for other technical services tasks, staff will likely continue to experience change in workflows and work roles. The interlibrary loan, sometimes not thought of as a technical service, and sometimes yes. It was part of technical services for a long time here, and no longer is at this point. While most books purchased outright by libraries are never used, a book that is requested through interlibrary loan has at least one guaranteed user. It is becoming common to purchase books rather than borrow them. Interlibrary loan collaborates with acquisitions and with collection development to determine if books will be bought or borrowed. Acquisitions therefore becomes part of the lending and borrowing process. And finally, there are the positions that I call the Trojan horses. These are librarians that report to many different departments in different libraries, but the tasks they perform are essentially technical services tasks. So for electronic resources librarians, negotiate contracts for e-materials, make sure that MARC records are added to the catalog, make sure that the library has access that it is paid for, remove records for out-of-date or unsubscribed materials. And finally, metadata librarians work outside of traditional technical services framework in many libraries, but perform many of the same tasks that traditional technical services librarians perform, except that their work deals exclusively with electronic materials. But cataloging is cataloging. So to summarize, technical services jobs will change, but they will also kind of stay the same. We are still purchasing monographs and serials. We are making those materials visible through the catalog, and we remove materials which are dated or unused. These are traditional technical services tasks, and we continue to perform them. Things may be kind of different, but they are also kind of the same. The values of traditional technical services will survive even as the methods of achieving those ends change. In short, technical services lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. So our second presenter today is Julie Moore, Collections Catalog Librarian at the Henry Madden Library at California State University in Fresno. Julie previously worked at Rutgers University, Alaska Resources Library and Information Services, Stetson University College of Law, and St. Leo College. She is an active OLAC member, and she received the Nancy B. Olson Award in 2010. Her MALIS is from the University of South Florida. And now I will turn it over to Julie. There may be a slight delay as we change presenters.
Hi there, this is Julie Moore. I am presenting a webinar entitled Providing Description and Access into the Future. I wanted to thank Alex for giving this great webinar. And this is a photo of me and my staff. I have a teacher resource center, and you can see the kind of fun things that I get to catalog. And you'll be seeing more of that later. Anyone who catalogs this kind of stuff needs to be a member of OLAC. So this is a shameless plug for OLAC. And also for people who are into rare books cataloging, there's the rare books and manuscripts section that also is very helpful.
Julie, we
Yes.
can't see your slides. You need to accept the presentation.
Oh, you can't see my slides. Where do I do that?
There should have been a pop-up window that came up.
Can that come up again?
No, because you are the presenter. Let me switch back to somebody else, and then I will switch back to you.
You can switch to me.
Okay.
Okay, so it says show my screen and click on
Yes.
that. Sorry, folks. So let me continue. This is Tall Paul. He's my sidekick. And I just wanted to mention I've been extremely fortunate to have worked with some outstanding visionary catalogers during my career. And I'll point them out as we go along. This is a velociraptor skull. I'm going to just show you a few of the things that I catalog. It's from the Cretaceous period. As I was preparing this presentation, I made the astute observation that the more mature, air quotes, that I've grown in the field, the older the stuff is that I catalog. And soon I will be the dino cataloger, I think, or maybe we'll call me a dino logger. That actually kind of appeals to me. Here's a meteorite that I cataloged. Meteorites, the absolute ages for meteorites is about 4.5 billion years old. This one fell to Earth in 1947 in Siberia, Russia. But we also have meteorites that came here during the Cretaceous period with the velociraptors. And here's a woolly mammoth ivory that is estimated to be about 150,000 years old. I don't catalog only old things, I also catalog games. And oh, this was so much fun. These are the pig lungs. This landed on my desk one day, and I have to say that it was rather smelly. They're pig lungs that are stained to replicate human lungs that of a smoker. In my cataloging workshops, we have had we've spent many hours debating the 336 content type and whether this is a tactile three-dimensional form because they have a cancer tumor implanted in it that the children can touch, which I find kind of gross. So anyway, I moved to the world of special collections cataloging a couple years ago. Here's one of my visionary friends, Michael Gorman. He's the former Dean of Library Services here at Fresno State, and I always keep his core values of librarianship in mind when I am presenting and also when I go to a different job. And the equity of access to recorded knowledge and information is one of the things that really stands out to me. So when I came to special collections, this was on my desk. So I moved from pig lungs to a lion's head from the World's Fair of 1915. This was the Panama Pacific International Exposition, a World's Fair that was held in San Francisco. And one of the main collections here in Special Collections at Fresno State is our World's Fair collection. While I was not there for the 1915 World's Fair, I was there for the 1964 World's Fair. This is a model of the New York World's Fair. There were only 8 that were built, and I think that 3 now only exist, and we have one of them. We also have the oldest book in our collection is 1474 collection of Vita Christi by Ludolf of Saxony in 2 volumes. It was acquired in 1963. And our 1,000th volume is a biography of Father Serra that was published in 1787. Now, a lot of our books have, in special collections, have things like 4-etch painting and marbled end papers. Here's an ad and map of the parent colonies, and it's from around 1891. And we also have lots of local, lots of historical documents. This is notice of the Japanese-American internment. This is kind of striking to me as my family was interned in during this time. And we have drawings of the Fresno Assembly Center here in our special collections. A few years ago, I decided to take a sabbatical and look at cataloging at the opposite ends of the continuum from rare books to digitized materials. And I did that by going to Rare Book School, and this man, Dr. Michael Suarez, is the director of Rare Book School. He is amazing, and I love the way he writes, and the way he writes is the way he talks. He's very eloquent. RBS is a dynamic community of people all dedicated to deepening our understandings of the book, capaciously conceived. Learning about its past, we commit ourselves to help shape its futures. I mean, that's kind of almost poetic to me. He has, he's also a university professor of English and the honorary curator of special collections at UVA. He's a Jesuit priest and holds 4 master's degrees and a doctor of philosophy in English from Oxford. So at Rare Book School, I took, of course, the cataloging class, and Amy happened to be in that class, and we had all sorts of fun learning about all of these different things. Special collections cataloging was brand new to me, so I was, you know, having to learn some of these things. this class, by the way, was taught by Deborah Leslie. Paper folding was one of the things. Now, I might be Japanese American, but I cannot do origami. And I'm one of those people that cannot unfold a map and fold it back the right way. So paper folding, I remember spending a lot of time folding and unfolding the papers. I know when Deborah was talking about duodecimal, I was looking for Dewey Decimal numbers. But anyway, we spent quite a bit of time on paper folding. And the notes were very interesting too. The physical and provenance notes are very meticulous and detailed, much more so than regular cataloging. And so here's an action shot of us. I think we were counting pages, which is harder than it sounds, in our book cradles with our rare books. And here's a photo of our graduating class of 2013, and Amy is the second person from the left with the blonde hair, and I'm way, way, way in the back. That's where I usually like to take my pictures. Then I went to Rutgers University to study with Grace Agnew, who is the metadata queen. She's the principal architect for the New Jersey Digital Highway, a statewide digital repository of cultural and historical materials. And I also took her class. She teaches a class on metadata, and I think it's through Library Juice, which is great. And one of the things that I found to be very enlightening was when she said what metadata has added to traditional cataloging is the understanding that the relationships between concepts are as important as the concepts themselves. And I found out that there were many commonalities between all of these different types of cataloging, but actually the main work as a catalog librarian remains the same: to describe materials and provide access to them so that the users can find, identify, select, and obtain those resources. And also we need to remember that these are users of today, not only, but also for users of the future. So into the future we go, and we have the sort of ultimate goal of positioning the library onto the global platform of the greater semantic web via linked data. So keeping in mind the types of materials that I catalog and have cataloged in my sabbatical and the metadata, I would like to propose a top 10 list of cataloging queries to keep in mind as we travel into the future of cataloging. And a lot of these are actual questions that I've gotten through workshops. Does MARC matter? No, not really. We need to remember that RDA is a content standard. It's not an encoding standard, and it's not a display standard. So it tells us, RDA tells us what data elements are required, but not where to put them or what they should look like to the public. RDA defines individual elements with controlled vocabulary lists. So no, this is not the time to get rid of authority control people. Used with MARC and BibFrame, but it can be used with other models. RDA defines relationships, and it relies on catalogers' judgment quite heavily. Number 9, a lot of people say, I've been using RDA in my cataloging. I don't really understand how adding a few new fields makes the cataloging any better. How do I get a better understanding of RDA and why we're doing this? And I would say, here's another visionary person, is Deborah Fritz. I've known Deborah since my beginnings in cataloging. She and her husband Richard Fritz have created RINF RDA in many metadata formats, and it helps the cataloger to understand. It's a visualization tool for catalogers and to help get them thinking in RDA instead of AACR and MARC. Cataloging query number 8, will RDA live up to its promise? Oh, well, there's Tall Paul. He always gets upset when we talk about promises. Reminds me of a couple of ex-husbands I had. Anyway, I think that I'd like to show you the Euler diagram here. You know, in the beginning, I recall librarians, especially library administrators, being really elated about the possibility of RDA cataloging becoming somehow simpler and easier and faster and cheaper while maintaining the quality of cataloging required to adequately find resources. If that was the expectation, then RDA has fallen short. But honestly, I would say that that was an unrealistic expectation. Because really, folks, there is nothing simple or easy or fast or cheap about recording human knowledge. Human knowledge is very complex, and the cataloging is also very complex. Again, the end goal of this is to get our library data out onto the semantic web. Cataloging query number 7, in the future, will normal catalogers be so picky? Well, here's another thing that I had to catalog. I'm not sure why this is going. This is another thing that I needed to catalog. It's a, it was from the Fresno State Normal School. So RDA demands precise data, and I have to give Chris Oliver credit for this slide. I thought it was so great. I just wanted to kind of leave the content like it was. Each element has the potential to be usable to search, to index, to build meaningful displays of data. Data in any element can be used by humans and by computers. And this is an example, the 264 field now, which replaces the 260 field on publication, and the second indicator, which tells us that tells us the function. And of course, with my teacher resource materials, you can have all of those, or a mixture of all of those. In RDA, there are lots of 3XX fields for more precise data. So yes, normal catalogers of the future will continue to be picky. And here in query number 6, here's an example. I'll give you the 3XX field. Let's revisit the pig's lungs. What was the early warning indicator that told us that this thing was not a book? And if you answered the GMD, General Material Designator, you are right. In RDA, there's no GMD. It was replaced by the content type, media type, and carrier type. Is this better? I'm not sure. Here's a 3XX for a kit. You know, so you can have many 3XXs for one kit. And cataloging query number 5. Is schema agnostic preferable to using MARC and mods. I would say that consistency is key. I am cautiously optimistic. It seems logical to me that there are advantages for all of us to be able to use the same set of instructions for description and access. Query number 4, is BibFrame a viable replacement for MARC? We'll have to just stay tuned on that. Watch the BibFrame website. This is exciting stuff that's happening there. Cataloging query number 3. For catalogers, does our past hold us back from jumping into the future? And here's a picture of Yoda. Yay, Yoda. Our history is very long and rich in cataloging. However, the future is even longer. And so we need to stay focused on the future, but we also need to acknowledge the past. And now we're down to cataloging query number 2. What about catalogers' judgment? Will we still need catalogers' judgment for the future? Now this is Jay White, who is a very good friend, a great cataloger, a mentor, a visionary, and I admire him so much. And he's written a lot, and I have a lot of what he's written on this one slide. I just want to read this to you because to me it just gives me goosebumps. Okay, so I want you to hear these words. The world of stuff to catalog is so vast, so slippery, so surprising that individual judgment will always enter into our decisions. Catalogers are thoughtful judges concerning matters of description and access. It is that judgment, leavened with imagination, that has carried catalogers through these decades of change. That same judgment and imagination will continue to stand them in good stead through the era of RDA and postmark data structure and whatever future marvels the world sends them to catalog. And one of the ways that he always leaves his workshops, he often says, do not agonize. So I just love that, and I love Jay for saying that. Cataloging query number 1, since cataloging is at the heart of technical services. If cataloging is dead, then tech services is dead. So do you think that cataloging is dead? And I would say that cataloging is not dead, it is evolving, but it is not dead. And it will not go extinct in the foreseeable future, says the Dino Logger. Why? Because there is still a need for human beings to organize, make accessible, and preserve the human record, not only for patrons, for the patron who's looking for information today, but for people in the future, far in the future when I'm gone. The role of the catalog librarian remains the same as it always has been, namely to describe resources so that users can find, identify, select, and obtain those relevant resources. The tools, the rules, and the metadata schema, they will all continue to evolve, but the purpose is still the same. So just remember to take your cataloger's judgment with you. And I'll take Tall Paul with me too. And that is the end for me. Thank you for your kind attention for both of our programs. And I wanted to ask if there's any questions.
Okay, this is Mary Beth Weber. I am one of the co-moderators with Allison Armstrong, she mentioned earlier. To give you some context, Amy and Julie collaborated on a book with me that was published in 2015 called Rethinking Library Technical Services, Redefining Our Profession for the Future. And I just have a couple questions for Amy and Julie based on their presentations. One of them is, how do you define technical services? What does that term mean to you? Amy, for example, talked about how cataloging technical services has been decentralized at her institution. Julie's worked in different venues and has had different types of assignments. At conferences, I often hear people talk about technical services, capital TS, and then also technical services, lowercase, meaning an operation or responsibility. So I'm just curious, what does the term technical services mean to each of you?
This is Julie. To me, cataloging is certainly at the heart of technical services. I am at Fresno State here. Our technical services was also kind of blasted apart into different realms. I think that technical services includes aspects of collection development, acquisitions, electronic resource management, and processing, book repair and preservation, and in some cases interlibrary loan as well. I still think of those all as technical services functions.
Hey, this is Amy. I think of technical services as the processes which make available materials and information to library users, so it can encompass a wide range of materials, of processes, and go into a wide range of departments. It's not necessary to have a division which is called technical services, and that's all technical services is.
Okay. I have another question for you, for both of you. I shouldn't say you specifically, but for both Amy and Julie. In light of developments such as vendor-supplied cataloging, discovery layers, PDA and DDA plans, do you feel that technical services has been deprofessionalized, and could you say why or why not?
I can answer that first. To me, if it's been deprofessionalized, it happened before I got into the profession, which is a long time ago, because people have been continuously sort of saying, oh, it's getting deprofessionalized, yet I haven't seen wide amount of change. There's a little more of people without MLSs doing quote original cataloging, but there's still the processes are all still the same whether the person has the degree or not, and the need for the knowledge is still there.
And this is Julie. Yeah, I think the thing is, when people don't have the degree, that sort of talks or speaks to it becoming deprofessionalized. You know, I started cataloging back in 1989, and I do think that technical services has been deprofessionalized. Back then, only MLS librarians were the ones to ever be able to touch a MARC record. We could, you know, nobody else could touch the OCLC terminal and and all of that. On the one hand, much of the work has become automated, more automated. Paraprofessionals can be trained to do so much of the work, and this really leaves the professionals level people with the MLSs available to do even more interesting and intellectually stimulating work, and to manage people and projects. And I was going to say, even at Fresno State 11 years ago, when I came here, we had 6 MLS catalogers, and I think we had something like 24 people altogether in technical services. And even in 2005, the catalogers were the only ones to really touch the records and to create originals. As our catalogers retired, they were not being replaced. This kind of coincided with hard times with the budget, but the decisions were made to not replace the catalogers, and as the staff members also retired, they were also not replaced. So now there are 2 paraprofessionals in cataloging here, and there's 1 adjunct catalog librarian, 1 faculty metadata librarian, and then there's me, who, and I've moved up to special collections. Which I noticed that Amy's also in special collections, so
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's where they put you when you're going out to pasture or what. But
Okay,
anyway.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Julie. We have a multi-part question from a participant, and I can read it for Amy and you if you'd like. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, it's from Bradley Hess. He has 3 questions. Actually, he has 4. The first is, how can a cataloger get the metadata skills and work experience necessary to compete for jobs in the future?
Well, basically, get a library science degree. You still need one if you're going to do the really interesting stuff. Do professionalization or not. Then get a job as a copy cataloger. There are still needs in departments for people who do paraprofessional work. I've had 5 people who followed this route. They've got their library degrees at FSU. They worked in my cataloging department. All of them got professional library jobs. And this is in the last 4 years maybe. So every year we put out a baby cataloger. So it can work.
Okay.
I would also
okay.
Can I
Julie.
respond to you?
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to add to that, when you're getting your MLS, be sure to do an internship, because that's a really good way to kind of dip your toe in the water and be able to see what the jobs entail and if you like it or not.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question that Bradley asked is, how useful are postmaster certificate programs in accomplishing this?
Hard to say. I took a couple of classes in a postmaster certificate, and I'm ashamed to say I didn't finish it, but it was useful to get me started on a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
Could be. It'd be interesting to someone looking at your resume.
Mm-hmm. Julie, do you have any thoughts?
Sure. I think I agree with Amy. I think that when we're librarians in general, we are very curious people, and we're always delving into what's the next thing. And I think it's great to get a postmaster's certificate if you can. I don't think that should be it has to be required for an entry-level sort of cataloger position, though.
No.
Mm-hmm. Okay, he has 2 more questions, but one of them, I'm going to ask the last one. We're not going to ask them in the order they were posted because I want to hear your answers on this. His last question is, what's the best way to get practical experience using metadata if you don't work in an institution that uses technology and software? It's a great question.
That's a really tough question.
Might go back to Julie's suggestion or your suggestion, Amy, of an internship.
I think an internship would be your best bet, to go to another institution that does use it and volunteer.
Right. I would also highly recommend finding out where it's happening, and a lot of times institutions are pretty inundated with stuff that they need to apply metadata to, and they don't have enough people to do the work. So if you can get sort of an internship or volunteer, that can really help a lot, and that looks great on your resume too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And some light programming, XML, XSLT. If you have those things, you are the fact that you haven't done the metadata per se is they can teach you the metadata, but it's harder to teach you the XML stuff.
Okay, then he has one last question, which is what's the best way to get, excuse me, I read that one, sorry. Are there other options for professional development? And I think you touched on some of that a little, both of you.
Well, I think the best way to get a library job is to get a library job. I mean, I hate to say it, but you don't necessarily need to get the library job. So be flexible. Look for a job that will put you in a place where you can ask for the opportunities and make yourself available to doing new things. Most people will take you up on it.
Right, and I started out, I was getting a degree in computer science and an added-on associate's degree, and while I was doing my schooling, I was just working as a page in a library shelving things, and the next thing I knew they had put me on the reference desk, and I was helping to answer questions and the circ desk, and I just kind of moved up, and then finally, my director pulled me in and said, you really should get an MLS. So I did that. So, it helps to just get your foot in the door and start doing the work. And even if it's not the ideal job to begin with, I think most of us don't, start out with our ideal job. Just get your foot in the door and start working and look for the opportunities.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to turn things, we have only a few minutes left, so I'm going to turn things back over to Allison so she can wrap up. And thank you for that question, Bradley. Or question, excuse me.
Thank you, Mary Beth, for facilitating, and thank you, Amy and Julie, for your presentations. We're glad you all could be with us today. You will soon receive a short online evaluation form. Please take a few minutes to respond to the questions. Your comments are very valuable and will help the ALEX Continuing Education Committee plan future events. ALEX offers certificates of attendance and digital badges for participants. Information on these will be in the email you receive. Thanks to Mary Reeder and Julia Hess, ALEX Tech Support, and Megan Doherty and Julie Reese with the ALEX office, as well as Mary Beth Weber for co-hosting with me. The support they provide make it possible for us to present these webinars smoothly. We have additional webinars, including part 2 of this series, coming up, as well as web courses that are offered throughout the year. We hope you will participate in other ALEX continuing education offerings in the future, and thank you for joining us.